Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Secrets of Viz. Today I have the IronViz winner, Bo McCready, in the house to talk about his journey and how he came about with the amazing performance at TC this year. So over to you, Bo.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Super stoked to have a chance to do this. So my name's Bo. I'm joining y'all from Austin, Texas tonight. I have been using Tableau for, I guess, about 12 and a half years now. I think when I started my very first adult job after school, I got sent to a data viz training in my first week on the job. And then my boss said, "Hey, I heard about this cool software called Tableau that they're using over at the Milwaukee Police Department. Maybe we can get you a license and see if you can do anything with it." And at that time, I was working for the Madison Metropolitan School District up in Wisconsin. So an education job. And I guess from there, we just started trying to figure out, hey, can we make better graphs than we're making in Excel, which I think is kind of like the start of a lot of people's journey in the Tableau ecosystem. And then I guess here I am almost 13 years later,
So 13 years later, you have about 200 vizzes on your Tableau Public. So that's essentially one per month. That's a lot of viz to go through in the past 13 years.
Yeah, and it's actually even worse than that because I didn't really start publishing anything on Tableau Public until the very end of 2018. So we're actually kind of looking at like 6 years of all those vizzes. And as you can tell, I love the hobby and I've had a good time.
I mean, the more you enjoy it, the more you get better at it, I guess, which is why you are here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So preparing for IronViz must have been quite a journey.
Yeah. So, in October, I think as a lot of us do, I sunk so many hours into that qualifying entry and obsessing about every little detail over and over again, every click, every tooltip, every graphical element. So then I think by the time I turned in my project, I kind of needed a little bit of a break from Tableau stuff. So it was a pretty chill couple months where I just enjoyed other hobbies, relaxed, and didn't really think a whole ton about IronViz. And then one evening in January, I got the email from Tableau out of the blue that said, "Hey, you're going to be an IronViz finalist." And I was out to dinner with my wife and my daughters, and I just handed the phone over to my wife and made her read it because I couldn't believe it. And then I emailed Alyssa back right away and said, "Hey, did you accidentally send this to all the people who entered, or like, did you mean to send this to me?" And then after it got confirmed, I won't say it starts getting crazy right away because there's definitely a period where there's a lot of time to just kind of sit and think about what you're going to do. And I think I only did actually like one Tableau public project in, I guess, now a 6-month span, just to kind of get some more practice with map layers because I knew I'd want to use that in my final build and wanted to get a little better at it. It was actually a pretty light Tableau time for me, which was good because that got balanced out by the time after we got the data, because that data set came in and that's go time, kind of pressure's on. So, yeah.
So this year's data set is a bit more serious. I think like in terms of exploring the data, it's a bit different from previous years where it's more fun. So what are the things that you thought about when you were exploring the data?
Yeah, so, when I first got the data set, this is a data set that I had seen before, and it's actually one that I had opened up and played around with a little bit before and thought, I'm not sure this one's really me, like nothing's really sticking out to me. So I hadn't actually really worked with it much before, but you're right, it is kind of a little bit more serious topic. And I think given some of the news in the US lately and some of the high profile aviation disasters that have happened in the last 6 months, I think it was important to me to have a positive and optimistic story that came out of this, but at the same time, not take it too lightly. I think there could have been a time that these projects could have been actually pretty lighthearted because it's a serious data set, but at the same time, there is some kind of amusing stuff in there. If you go in and read the case notes, like 2 of these reports are about bears. Like, how the heck did something happen between a plane and a bear? And so there's the opportunity to find those kinds of silly stories in it. But ultimately, given the context, I just thought, like, okay, let's look for something in here that's going to hopefully leave everybody in that, IronViz room walking out feeling a little bit safer than when they came in, because I was definitely playing with that data and getting more and more anxious as I kind of looked at the trends and the news and thought, like, oh gosh, I don't know how we possibly tell this story. But at the end of the day, I think everybody found a path through that data that focused less on the anxiety and the fear and more on safety. And I think we all got there, but that was definitely a huge part of the first like week with the data, just figuring out how do I mine something out of this that's not going to have everybody freaking out about getting on a plane the next day. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So for your IronViz, the Viz anchor point is on flight 1549, which is the Miracle on the Hudson. For the audience who are not too familiar with this event, could you just walk us through a little bit on this whole saga?
Yeah, so this was definitely big news when it happened, but this was basically a plane coming out of New York shortly after takeoff, crashed into a flock of geese, had some serious engine damage, and ultimately the famous pilot was able to bring the plane down safely in the Hudson River, and everybody survived, only minor injuries. It was definitely kind of this exceptional case of like, wow, something terrible almost happened, and yet through professionalism, heroism, and calm in the face of something terrible, the outcome ended up being pretty much miraculous. So folks started referring to it as the Miracle on the Hudson, and that nickname stuck. And there was a big budget movie with Tom Hanks. So it definitely became a big part of our culture and the way that people think about things like this. But when I actually opened up the data set, I was not looking for that flight. I wasn't thinking right away, like, this is the anchor where I'm going to split the data. Because for me, I remembered that event, but I think a lot of people, we remember that it happened, but you don't remember that it was caused by a flock of geese. So it didn't even occur to me like, oh, I'm going to go hunt for that in the data. But I went through my typical process and I just started looking for outliers. And one of the fields in that data set is basically the financial cost of damage done during an incident. And that one was like a far, far outlier because, you know, even though everyone survived and the injuries were minor, the plane was out of commission after that. So that was definitely the biggest thing in the data set. And I thought, oh yeah, I remember that. I forgot that it was geese, but that's something that's hopefully going to resonate with people and something that we can anchor the story around. And then started doing a little bit more background research about that event and everything that happened afterwards. Read lots of government reports and hundreds of pages of tables and FAA documents and stuff. And there's definitely a story in there. That incident really changed everything, at least in terms of wildlife safety. And so I thought, okay, well, if the official government docs are telling us that this is the event that was really the before and after when it comes for safety, then I'm going to anchor my presentation that way. And that's how it started.
So in terms of the design, I can't help but notice that this has very close design aesthetic to your IronViz entry in October, in terms of the borders and the little mascot that you have, the musical mascot back in October, but this time around you had the little cloud figure.
Yeah, no, I definitely was inspired by the qualifying entry. I feel like we all go through like style phases, and for whatever reason, the qualifier entry worked for me this year. And I thought, you know, okay, if it's not broken, let's not try to fix it. Some folks listening might know too that my wife and I operate a little screen printing shop in our backyard, and we design t-shirts. And I've enjoyed making little cartoony characters for shirts just for our family or for stuff like that. And so it's definitely kind of part of my aesthetic right now. And I think in general too, there's only so much time to prepare an IronViz entry. You will sometimes see people going back to like, these are the beats that I know how to hit. These are the things that are comfortable and familiar to me. But yeah, I think that's just kind of how I've generally been designing lately.
Yeah, I love it. I think probably if we look forward maybe 6 months to 1 year, we'll have a whole family of Bo's unique characters or something.
Absolutely. There are worse things to be known for.
I'm sure. So walk us through your iterations, like how do you arrive at this final piece and how you built the story around?
So there are a couple things that I played with over the first few weeks that didn't end up making the cut in the final project, but definitely informed the process. So the first thing I thought of was like, okay, we're thinking about sky, we're thinking about clouds. Let's get some light blue and some white colors in here. And then the other thing that I thought of was pilot wings. I have two little daughters, and those kind of gold pilot wings that they'll give kids sometimes when they fly on a plane was like one of the very first things that stuck in my head. So I spent a while thinking like, okay, I'm going to have my headers look like pilot wings, and I'm going to put stuff within those. I was starting with this gold and white and blue, and really ended up building pretty much all of the viz in that palette. But then started kind of showing things to people and getting feedback on my little pilot wings header shape. And then first person I showed it to was like, is that a snitch from Harry Potter, like a golden snitch? And I was like, no, I really hoped it was going to work as Pilot Wings, but yeah, the second person I showed it to was like, oh, it kind of looks like the Whataburger logo, which is like a popular fast food chain down here in the South. And I thought, okay, I guess maybe these Pilot Wings aren't going to work for everybody. And I don't want to have to explain it. From there, kind of definitely started taking gold out of the color scheme and trying to take a different approach. And so I think another part of the process that is not obvious to people is the interaction you do have with your supervisor during the development process. Clara Wu was a fantastic partner in the work and pushed me super hard to think differently about the designs and do things in different ways. Ultimately, my first full draft of the Viz, the content itself was pretty close to what you ended up seeing on screen. There definitely were some tweaks and some adds and some drops like there always are, but it was fairly similar, but with the big difference being there's a white background. There were multiple shades of gray and blue happening within the layout. I did have some of the gold in that first build because I was still trying to make the Pilot Wings work. And Clara encouraged me, like, put this up on a screen or on a wall or as big as possible and think how it's going to play in that IronViz room. And when we looked at this white, gray, and pale blue design, it just didn't pop. It was calm, it was elegant, but there was not enough contrast. It was just not doing what we wanted it to do. I felt good about the analysis, I felt good about the story that we were going to tell, but the design just was not there. And ultimately for me, I knew that this project was always going to be maximizing contrast as much as possible. And you can't maximize contrast without a white or black background, unfortunately. So if white wasn't working, it was time to try black and see if that would pop a little bit better. And it did. During that process, we talked a lot about simplifying and intentionality and trying to get to a place actually where every color that appears within that viz has a distinct meaning. We were able to get to this place with the black background where we bring in the light blue color, like the little cloud character, only for layout and navigation stuff. Those kind of salmon and orange colors always represent a specific era when you see them. That red color that you're going to see pop at different points during the viz, it always means high damage. And then white is text or stuff that we don't need to classify. And so at the end of the day, we ended up with a viz that only has 5 colors in it. And every time you see those colors, they have a distinct meaning. Popped much better in the early drafts for sure.
It's interesting that you pointed out contrast because this is the first year that we've seen all 3 entries having a background. Was that something planned or like everyone just...
Yeah. We didn't plan it, but I guess we all went through the process of going back and watching old competitions and seeing what scored well and seeing what really resonated with people. I just think in a big room on a huge screen, those dark backgrounds are a little calmer. Sometimes a huge white screen can be a little intense. And for me, you can lose the data, particularly when it's up against like darker curtains. And so for me, black ended up being the right choice because it let, the brightest thing on stage as I was talking, and that was the goal.
That's awesome. So what would you say is the most challenging part of your build?
Yeah, so this will be a fun one to share. As we think about getting under those 20 minutes, I think the IronViz process for a lot of people, you work and you build something that you're happy with, and you're like, okay, this project is good. I stand behind my work here. And then at the end of the day, what does it look like for me to build this thing from scratch? So the first time that I tried to build the project I was happy with, it took me 55 minutes. I'll say that the process of cutting from about 55 to 28 minutes was actually not that hard. That was a matter of what are some things I can push into prep? What are some shortcuts I can find? 28 minutes to 19, that was the really, really hard part. I had a couple more complicated things in my build that didn't end up making the cut. I'll screen share and show one of them right now. If I had had more time, instead of that bar chart at the top, you would have seen a spike map that looks like this. So
okay.
I spent a bunch of time getting better at Mapbox, learning how to create this dynamic map that ultimately was just the USA filled in and the rest of the Earth was basically black. And my Tableau prep flow had data densification. Originally, those 3 layers supported, not just these eyelash graphs, but also these spike maps. I really loved these, and these were a very, very hard cut for me because I loved the Mapbox integration. I thought it was a cool feature to show off. I love how the spike maps look aesthetically, but at the end of the day, it just took too long to build these. And when I was getting down to 22, 23 minutes, this was the last cut, really. I feel like I'm going to publish like a director's cut at some point where I'm like, if I had more time, the viz would have looked like this. And so, yeah, so these were a super hard cut for me. But when I swapped them for the simple bar graph, I got down to about 19 right away. There was a whole path of analysis and a ton of stuff that I wanted to show that got cut. And I'll eventually write a blog about that.
This is the premise of why I'm doing this podcast as well, because everyone sees the final product, but there's so many things that go behind the scenes. Like you pointed out, you had to cut the entire spike charts. There's so many decisions that we make as vizzes, just so we can achieve what we want. For you is making sure that you get to the 18 and 19 minute mark. But this is beautiful. I love listening to stories about this. So looking ahead, I know you've recently launched your blog, so you probably have a lot of content you're planning to roll out in the next couple of months. Is there anything that you want to shout out for now?
Yeah, I would say just keep an eye on my site, boknowsdata.com, same as my handle on social media. I'm going to be doing realistically a whole series of stuff on IronViz. So hopefully I can share my experience. That'll resonate with some people. I'll mention as well, our screen printing side hobby, Pie Chart Press, is our brand. Had to name it after the chart type that we all love to hate. So if you happen to be local to Austin, we're in a bunch of shops around the city and got some big spring markets coming up. So definitely check that out. I have a couple of collaborative vizzes in the works in very early planning stages. I feel like collaborative vizzing is something that I've always wanted to get into, but for whatever reason, it hasn't happened a ton yet. So definitely have a couple of projects in mind right now with some folks that are going to be recognizable throughout the community. Those are my highlights.
I feel like you missed the boat with your blog site naming. You should have went with Bo Knows IronViz rather than Bo Knows Data.
Well, I feel like Bo Knows Data is a little more timeless. Maybe I'll also buy bonowsironviz.com and set up the redirect, make it work that way.
Cool. So it's been really great speaking with you, Bo. Just looking at behind the scenes of your IronViz performance on stage. I know everyone learned a lot from this episode, and we'll see everyone at the next one. Thank you. So I guess art and design runs in the family.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I come from, I guess, generations of painters, and I didn't really inherit that talent, but can at least take some of the design lessons from them that I put into the work for sure.
I mean, Data Viz is a kind of design in that as well. So
It is. Yeah, no, yeah, it totally is. And like, I love it because I don't know, I feel like I have the same ideas in my head, but like my hands just won't do it if I try to like draw or paint. But yeah, the digital stuff works. So yeah.